Uh, Welcome everyone to the technical webinar here. I am Richard Bourgault. I'm the CEO of SegStream. We, of course, do these things periodically because we like to, explore the space of cost segregation, peripheral services, obviously tax, and so far as it touches that. And so this is the call. I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co-hosts here, Don Polin and John Denovich. Don, if you'll take it away for your introduction.
Thanks, Richard. I am a CPA who's been working in this space for about 12 years, and I like to do the deep dive in the tax law. That doesn't mean I have all the answers, but I like to try.
Don't
That's
be
pretty much
modest.
my story. Yeah.
Hi, my name is John Denovich. Been in the cost segregation arena for about 25 years. So got some experience and known Richard for a long time, been working with Don for many years.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess we'll just move on to the first topic here, which is, let's see. I guess the first one we're going to go to is depreciation recapture. And I think Don is uniquely positioned, as we spoke before the call, to give a sort of a primer on this, and we'll just go from there. Don?
Okay, sure. I will depreciation recapture, there's a lot of confusion around it in general. But the way I like to explain it is, first of all, you cannot avoid it. You must recapture depreciation when you sell a building for more than you purchased it for, or more than your net book value after you've done depreciation. So even straight line depreciation, you will recapture that. So when you sell an asset that depreciates for an appreciated price, that's what happens. So you're basically taking just a portion of your capital gain, which everyone knows gets a preferential rate, and putting it back into another bucket that might have a different tax rate. So where I think people get confused is they think that they're going to be paying more to the IRS with recapture, and they're not. They're giving back what they got, and largely and to a certain degree, it's going to be at a preferential rate. So there is a permanent positive rate play for the client. So depreciation recapture is not something that you should be afraid of. And I get a lot of people just shy away from it. If you sell an asset just 1 year after you did a cost seg study, think about this, you're just going to give back what you got, but you did get to hold the cash for at least that year or two. But that's why everybody says to hold your asset for a few years, because you're going to get more benefit from that to overcome the cost of the study is all. But it's not a penalty. Recapture is not a penalty at all.
Right, so that's a great point. So essentially, if you've, what you're really looking for is to recapture before you pay recapture is to get your value from the study. So if you can get the value from the time value of money perspective, in a couple of years, then and hopefully you exceed that, by some margin, then that's the key. But yeah, there's no penalty you paid unless you paid more in the fee than it took than you made off of the zero interest loan situation that you essentially got yourself into.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
you did say something on the pregame that I thought was interesting, which for people that are involved in the actual depreciation of these things to take into account, and I think essentially it centers around insofar as you would have taken straight line depreciation on any of the assets you took accelerated depreciation on, when you do get when you are calculating recapture, you need to see what portion of that straight line what portion of the accelerated depreciation would have been taken as straight line and put that into the 1250 bucket so that
Yeah.
you're not paying as high a tax rate on that because you're paying a higher tax rate on the accelerated depreciation piece. So
Mhm.
if you maybe just give an example there, Don, just so.
I'll give an example. So that's so basically when you recapture, you're taking capital gain, which you could be in the 15% bucket, but you could be in the 20% bucket. A lot of people who sell a big piece of real estate, that's going to throw them for that tax year anyway into a 20% cap gain bucket. So the or when you do your recapture, now you're taking some of that capital gain, you're either going to put it in the unrecaptured 1250 bucket, which is a 25% rate. That is only for real property. So when we talk about our 15-year asset, we're going to maybe put some of that there. So we'll come back there. Or you're going to put it just back into ordinary income and it'll be taxed at whatever your ordinary income rate was. And we know that when you took the depreciation deductions, they probably were against ordinary income. It depends, of course, what you have and if it's passive or whatnot, but that's the general rule. But so for your 5-year property, that's considered personal property. That's a 1245 asset. So that is always going to go back into your ordinary, recaptured into ordinary rates. But your 15-year property is some of it or all of it is 1250 property. And so that means it's real property. That means that if you had taken straight line on that, so like if you sell after 15 years and your whole 15-year life is gone, even if you bonused it in year one, then you would have taken straight line, you would be in the same place in depreciation at the end of that. So all of that money goes into the 1250 unrecaptured gain. So if you're halfway through the life, if you're 7 years in, you calculate what would have been my straight line depreciation on this 15-year asset if I had done straight line, and let's say that's a certain portion of it, that portion then gets put into the 1250 recapture bucket. The accelerated piece gets put back into ordinary income. So that's the rule, is that only your accelerated depreciation is from straight line, that was accelerated gets put into ordinary
It's
recapture
recaptured at
buckets.
ordinary income tax. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just so now, that obviously, so I think maybe, the question in some people's mind, and we kind of talked about this was, so I think some people, believe that that extends to 1245 property and what you're saying is it doesn't, and there's no way to do that, even though some people say, oh, I had this, property for 5 years. I, took all my 5-year properties all depreciated. Now all of that goes into 1250 property as well when I do the recapture.
Yeah, no, actually, what I see is not that. So for a 5-year asset, after 5 years, so let's just say kitchen cabinets or whatever, and we know that when people you sell, the person who's buying, they're probably going to rip that out and redo it. Especially like a retail space or something like that. There's no value to them for that. But if you, so a lot of times they say that has zero value, so I'm not going to recapture any of it. They're going to let that difference just stay in the capital gain bucket. Because what you're doing is moving capital gain monies. When you sell an asset, your basis is not taxed because you didn't get
Mm,
it's just your
yeah.
capital gain. They just let that go back into capital gain. Technically speaking, the law doesn't say that. It says that anything you got accelerated depreciation on, when you sell it for an appreciated price, you got to put that back into ordinary. But I know a lot of firms, and there is an argument out there. I've had people argue with me, but that there's no value there. And maybe if you're doing a purchase price allocation and you put no value there, I don't know. I would be interested to see what people are seeing out there for that. But when you read the letter of the law, there is no buts into it.
But how does that work out from an accounting perspective? I mean, that seems so the books just get, so you're saying that it does get accounted for. It just gets accounted for in a bucket that you don't believe it should go into.
Well, right, it's going to be capital gain. Yeah, you're paying tax on it. So if you're in the 15% rate, I think the 15% rate is if you're like for a married filing joint return, your AGI is 500, right around there. But
Hmm.
let's say you sold a building with $1 million gain. Well, that's going to throw your AGI into the 20% bucket. So you're going to pay 20% cap gain rate on that, as opposed to if that 5-year depreciation piece went back into your ordinary rates, which if you have high income that year could be 37%. You're saving 17% by doing that, but you're still paying tax on the difference for sure.
Okay.
So, I mean, when you're an accounting firm, I'll just tell you guys has to do this stuff manually. It's not done by the software. This is not something that I have ever seen software do. I could be wrong on that. There could be some sophisticated softwares, but like CCH and a lot of the software that the firms use, it doesn't do this. You've got somebody calculating this by hand and then putting it back in.
Okay. John, anything to add there? Mr. Mystery, who's fading into the background with all the black on.
Well, not being a CPA, looking at it from the cost seg, side, you get arguments, from folks that maybe say, well, I really don't want to do a cost seg study. My CPA tells me I got to recapture it all anyways. So when you sell, you look at recapture, like doing a cost seg study, all your benefit is like a loan. It's like an interest-free loan, and you put it to work for you. Like if you had big enough numbers, maybe you save 500,000, you can put it in a bank account now. I mean, you get 4%, you just do the math. The cost seg study itself is so minimal, you definitely, more than pay for your cost seg fee when doing a study. And really you look at recapture, the recapture part as, you're getting a loan, an interest-free loan, that, in the early years, you're able to put this money to work. You can renovate, you could hire more people, you could buy another piece of property, you can pay down a note. You put it to work for you. When you sell, you always recapture everything. It's like a loan. And now when the loan is due, you pay the loan, but when it's many years down the road, you've made money on your property if you're selling a property. And it just kind of gets buried. It's to me, it's like you make so much money on the tax savings, by doing a study, that the fee becomes nominal. You always win. But one of the things that people that get a little confused about is that, oh, I've had my property for 5 years, and so now I've written off. I don't have to give that back. No, you always give back every penny. When the property sells. Is that correct, Dawn?
Mhm. All of your depreciation, whether it's straight line, accelerated, doesn't matter. Whatever
Yeah.
depreciation you
Even
take,
if
if
you
you're
didn't
required to
do,
do it, you have to give it
e-
back.
even if you didn't do a cost seg study. If
Mhm.
you wrote, if 10 years into the 39 year, there's 10 years of depreciation you've taken. Now you sell, you're going to recapture that 10 years of depreciation that you've taken, right?
You're exactly right. So let's say if you wait the 15 years, you're in the exact same place depreciation wise, if you did a study or didn't do a study. And if you didn't do the study because you were afraid of recapture, you just shot yourself in the foot because you're still
Right.
recapturing the same exact amount after 15
Yeah.
years.
And so it becomes very simple from my perspective, not being a CPA that's going to be calculating all this stuff. It's like, you should never be afraid of recapture. It should never be, it should, you always face recapture. Why not why not keep money in your pocket, and put it to work for you? That it's cost segregation is just a tax strategy. It's all it is. And it becomes pretty simple when you think about it that way.
Some good tips on how to sell this to your clients who are a little bit more
Hesitant.
apprehensive.
Mhm.
I like that. Okay. I think that's, unless anybody has any questions about that, we can move on to the next topic. And so the next topic is, that was good timing. Cost seg for complex property types. I skipped over actually the first one.
Well,
Uh,
Richard, under that recapture strategy and exit planning, we also had
1031
planning cost.
exchanges.
Yeah,
Oh man,
1031 exchanges and
talk
how to
about a
prepare
sticky
clients for
situation.
pre-sale. Yeah.
Well,
Sticky
yeah.
situation.
Well,
Yeah.
you just dragged us right back into that's the whole quagmire. That should have been its own thing, right? Based on at least my
Well, we don't have to beat it in the ground, but
sure.
planning cost seg around 1031 exchanges is a pretty simple topic, really. There's just a couple of key points to know about.
Get the CPA to do everything. If you're the CPA, watch out.
Mhm.
Um, well, John, let's take your, I mean, any take you've got, and then of course we're gonna have to hear from Dawn because she's gonna have to bring us down to earth on
Right. Not
who
to
should be
get
doing
too
this and
too not to get too technical about it, but do we run into these things? Yes, we do. They seem to come in bunches. You think you're going to get, oh, all these 1031 exchanges. Oh my God, my world's going to end. But really, you don't get that many. They are popular. And what you just got to know as a cost seg professional is if there is a 1031 exchange involved, it will affect the basis. When you get your closing statement, it's not going to be that top line, the purchase price. It's going to be most of the time less. And who, as a cost seg professional, where the pitfalls are is, with the new regs, anything that's new to you, in other words, if you put money into the deal, that part, that portion is eligible for bonus. But if it's been transferred from an older property that's not new to you, so that we kind of call it old money, new money. Like if it's old and it has to do with the transferred property, it doesn't get bonus. And if you put new money into the deal, and it does get bonus, and then your basis is going to shrink. Well, how do you do an estimate on that? It's like someone has to provide, the client, the CPA, has to provide you with what's my new basis going to be and what portion is going to be old money and new money. And sometimes that can be rather difficult. And that's the sticky point about 1031 exchanges. The original firm that I was with, many, many years ago, basically their position was very simple. It was like, you tell me what the basis is. When you come to me and you want an estimate, and how much it would cost, the fee, the time involved in the fee is based on what the purchase price was, and what you're dealing with. That doesn't change, but the benefit changes. So, our position in that original company 25 years ago, and they came from the Big Eight when there was Big Eight, is that the answers, these answers come from the client, from the CPA. But many, many times the CPA is never going to be crunching these numbers until it's tax time. So how do you get an estimate out and get the job done prior to that? That becomes the challenge. And so what we try to do now in 2025 is try to be, ask the correct questions and try to be directionally correct. Get a closing statement. Have the closing statement for the exchange property, have the closing statement, for the purchase property, and a depreciation schedule to show, what depreciation has already been taken off of the exchange property. It can get you close, and the closing statement itself might have the loan on it, like the new money, So you can get directionally correct, and then you can give a broad estimate and say these numbers are not finite, but we know how much time and effort, and the complexity of your project. So your fee is going to be X. That's not going to change. But here's your benefit. And if there's enough benefit there and you try to be conservative and it's directionally correct, you let them know, that that's about the only way that you can handle it. And we've never really run into a situation where we can't, still do an estimate on it and still, land a study. There are some though that just by the time they do the exchange, there's really just not enough basis anymore. And if it's all exchange money, there's no bonus. So you're going back to, but see, I come from the era
Net
before
present value.
bonus. Before bonus, you see, when there was no bonus ever, you were always looking at what's the final, value of a cost seg study over 39 years. That's how you sold your property. That's how you did your ROIs. Where nowadays, with bonus and everything, everyone looks at first year or 5-year windows or 10-year, So
Yeah,
that's
it's funny because the net present value calculation has just disappeared from like pretty
yeah,
much everyone's proposal because why even get into that? Some people don't even know what those three letters mean. And
yeah.
and it's like trying to explain it, it's just a whole other problem when you can be like, here's the cash you'll save first year, you know.
Yeah. But there's generally always going to be benefit. And cost seg fees, I mean, yeah, that can be very low for a very small project, very easy, very quick to do, and higher for the more complex and the more time you're going to have into it. But I find, my argument is that the cost seg fees are nominal. They're very low. I mean, I should never. People will get an appraisal. They'll maybe do a inspection report and an environmental report and an appraisal report and add that all together, and it's 10 grand. It's like cost seg is just another accounting fee.
Right, and in those cases, they're actually not. I mean, they're not technically getting anything in return. I mean, they
Yeah,
have to
right.
do it, but the cost seg is actually delivering value. So I mean,
That's
that's
right.
the
And
crazy.
also cost seg also offers many, many other advantages. It's like once you've done a study and you've itemized all the assets, you've got them right there for retirement.
Yep.
Oh, I
First class at
replaced
disposition.
this HVAC unit, I replaced this chiller, or I replaced all the flooring. And it puts you, and also one of the big ones, and then a lot of people, the big companies are going to hire folks to do this, but that's a repair and maintenance regs. It's like, just your general maintenance. Oh, I have a 5-story building and I replace flooring on floor one, that becomes repair because it's not a major portion of the component. You have 5 floors, it's only 20%. And rule of thumb is 30% or less of the whole component, you can expense as a repair, and so there's a lot of things that cost seg can provide, other than just which is the standard benefit, the original benefit. So, and you're also maximizing depreciation from day one. So
No, that's
at least
great. I'm
that,
glad you brought up the repair and maintenance. I think that's another issue. If if there's a lot more to explore there, I mean, we could obviously do that on another call. I think that's great because I think a lot of people are overlooking that.
yeah.
Um, oh, that's cool. So back to 1031s, Don.
Mhm.
What well, I mean, our audience here is mostly concerned with cost seg. We do have, I'm sure, some CPAs on. What I know what do you say just in general when we're talking 1031s when you see a 1031 come in for a cost seg? What is your prescription?
Well, basically, John, John and I work on these a lot together, and he pretty much outlined it. I try, you're never, if you want to try to sell the study, then you're going to have to prove there's an ROI for the client. So you're going to have to get directionally correct for the basis. So I will ask those questions. A new question that I think I'm going to ask people, and I had one earlier today call me, and is this the first time you've exchanged, or is this like 2 exchanges or more in? Because if you are 2 or 3 exchanges in, then it might not even be worth my time at all to even look at it for you.
That's not to mention multiple exchanges coming into this one, right? So like one where they're just like pooling 4 exchanges, right?
That's what I mean. That's what
Oh,
I mean.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. That just means, yeah. And then, right. They can get very complicated if they've done, I exchange one property for two, and then my brother Rick owns 50% of this one. And then, I mean, and this stuff happens. But 100% of the time, people will say, this was what it's worth. This is what I bought it for. So you just have to know, and they have to know that,
Yeah.
that's not what
100% of
you
the time they're
look
wrong
at.
about
Well,
what the
that's
100% of
basis
the time
is for
that
the
that
cost
is
seg.
not worth it.
yeah.
So this call I had earlier was from a CPA, and he had his clients in the room, and he said, "So what do you think? Can we do a study?" I said, "Well, I can't tell you anything unless I know the basis of the 1031s." And I said, "Do you have those numbers?" "Oh yeah, we have them calculated. We'll send them to you." I can put money on the fact that that is not true, that they're not calculated. Then they're not going to send them to me. So who knows where that's going to go. So that's the thing that's tough about the 1031s. I mean,
Yeah.
people just don't understand that. And it is so common, like John said, and people who do the 1031s are a little bit more tax savvy. They're looking for all these tax savings. So they are always going to want to layer them on top of it, but really the benefit is if they trade up. If they trade up, which they oftentimes do because they don't want any boot, they don't want any taxable event from the actual exchange. Um, then it's never going to be like a really
Just
even
sorry,
Steven.
stop. Explain boot really quick, just for the general audience here.
Oh, okay. So boot is if you exchange a boot, if you exchange a property, it is potential for a portion of that to still be taxable right now. So if you bought, and if you were to ask your client, did you get any cash that stayed in your bank account, came to you, stayed in your bank account from the deal? If they say yes, they're going to be paying tax on that portion that came out. So if there was like a dangling $300,000 that was extra, then that's gonna be considered boot, and they're gonna pay. And it's also not like a penalty. They're just gonna pay tax on that little piece, the tax
Yeah.
that they would have paid had they not done a 1031.
So boot is jargon for the piece that's left over that they didn't spend on the new property, right?
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
even
Yeah,
like um but this usually won't happen, right? So like if I sell a property for $800,000 and I buy one for 1.5 million, I mean, there's no way to get boot on that. I mean, even it like because unless I'm just like, oh no, I'm going to take $500,000 of it and only put $300,000 in. I mean, I guess
exactly.
that could happen, right? But
That could happen,
why would you do the
especially.
1031 at that point, right? It's kind of weird.
Well, I have seen people that just do the 1031 because they think they should, not because it really
Uh,
makes sense. I have seen people do a 1031 to shield just like $10,000 of gain, which their gain on that would have been $1,500, and then they paid $1,500 to the exchange agent to handle the transaction. I've
sure.
seen that.
Wow.
So, I mean, people don't necessarily, there are a lot of people who just think that they want to grab these tax incentives and don't really like think it through. But yeah, I mean, there that can trigger boot. I mean, not to get too much into the weeds, if you have like a purchase price allocation and then you have too much personal property that was segregated out initially coming over, that can technically trigger boot. But that's a whole nother problem as to who's really watching out for that. It could bust the transaction. Is the qualified intermediary looking at that? No, they're not. So, um, there's a lot of questions in 1031s, and there's a lot that doesn't get done properly. I can tell you that actually.
Yeah, one of the things you need to think about when you get a new client or really just any client, or CPA comes to you and says, "Oh, I want you to look at a cost seg for my client." Well, new construction's easy. It's like, yeah, whatever the cost is, right? I need the cost. But whenever you've got a purchase, the first question is, was there a 1031 exchange? Okay. Second question was there renovations done, after the purchase of this property, and you can't really do an estimate, really know the complexity of the project without asking those two questions on the front end. So, for me, it just it's in my brain because, once you've been burned here once or twice, you do an estimate without asking those questions, you learn from that. And so question always is, oh, I bought a property. Oh, did you do a 1031 exchange? No. Did you do any renovations to the property after you purchased it? No. Okay, beautiful. Then we can move on. Otherwise, on the front end and you deal with it on the front end.
Yeah, you're not
Yeah,
promising $500,000 in benefit on a $500,000 basis.
yeah. Well, I mean, and that's just it. That hurt. I mean, it's a relationship business. It's a referral type business. And you always, it affects your integrity if you're not asking those questions. You know.
Mhm.
Done.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. And it's tough. I mean, the 1031s, I talked to somebody who was had sold cost seg for years, and he said if they did a 1031, he just turned them away because he didn't want to deal with it. I mean, they get sticky. I get that. They get sticky. However, there's benefit there. There can be benefit there. Usually there's benefit there. And those people also want to, do both if they can. And so it's your choice whether you want to turn them away or not.
Right. And
We tend to try to help them.
there's also the benefits that we talked about before, repair and maintenance. Once you've itemized everything and you've got everything, dispositions, like when you retire an asset, you can't do any of that unless you do a cost seg, So the cost seg serves a lot of different purposes.
Yeah.
We should be apportioning value to those services, those future services, when we come up with the fee, right? Because it's like, hey, this is not you're not eligible. I like that, John. I'm gonna put that into a marketing piece
Yeah.
for people to use.
Well, part of when you're establishing a fee, there's always the time and the effort and costs that go into it, but there are also the expertise. When you show your expertise, people should pay for that. And
Yep.
so, that just sets you apart. When you ask
It,
those
sh-
kinds of
it
questions
should.
and
It's hard. It's
you know,
hard. You still gotta. I will say though that I do CPEs for other CPAs, CPA credits, and I did one on Recapture last month, so that's more fresh in my mind. I'm doing one next month on the combination of 1031s and cost segs. So
Ooh.
maybe you can ask me more questions next month, and that because I haven't made my slides yet, because the whole piece that I mentioned, the 15% de minimis rule that came out from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I don't know if you guys know that, if you exchange a certain amount of tangible property with your real property when they got rid of the ability to exchange personal property. That is honestly still to this day, 8 years, 7 years later, like a black hole for people. And what does that really mean? How does that really work? There's a big disconnect out there in practice of of the answer to those two questions. And so we're going to kind of dive into that. I don't know if we're going to come up with great answers, but I already sat with a panel of a couple other CPAs and we hashed it out for like an hour and a half last month.
Well, Dawn, we'd love to plug you. Where are you doing that CPE talk?
Stratford,
Okay.
Strafford, I think is how you spell it. And it's, yeah, Stratford CPE.
Look for Dawn on Stratford CPE. Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So I think that's probably as far as we would like to go with 1031s, unless anybody has a specific question. I don't see any questions. So we can go ahead and move on. Complex property types, and then we'll hit AI automation last, I think. Um, oh gosh, I thought this started at the bottom of the hour. I was like, oh my gosh, we're already an hour. No, good. We have about 28 minutes left. So let's go ahead and hit into cost seg for complex property types. I mean, this is just kind of a blanket thought we had was like, hey, look, what are all the considerations in 2025 around doing, more complex property types, including manufacturing, including, like medical buildings, et cetera. QPP should probably obviously be broached here. But John, why don't you just kind of give a general
Well,
take on this?
okay. Well, I mean, you're always, well, I mean, at least what I've always done and practiced in the firms that I've been associated with, we always do an estimate of benefits, on the front end just to see what the ROI would be. How do you measure whether I should do a study or not? And if it's in a client's best interest to do a study, you must have an estimate of benefits, right? And then you have to have a fee so that you can look at an ROI. Well, when you get into these type like cold storage, medical, manufacturing, you are going to get a higher, reclass on that in the shorter lives. And generally, those types of facilities, maybe sometimes medical can be urban, in a building, with a parking garage. But there's usually, pretty extensive site improvements, and you're going to get bigger 5 or 7 year estimates. And I think if you've done these types of studies, you know that like cold storage, has just a litany of things that other properties just don't have, like cooler panels and all the cooling and all of these things. And medical facilities like hospitals. Oh my gosh, you got your surgeries, and you might even be able to accelerate. We've always kind of thought that if you have a surgery center and you have a unit that's just dedicated to that surgery unit, that is a specialty unit because of the airflow. That the airflow has to be a positive airflow. So in other words, to keep the bacteria and that type of thing down. So there are a lot of if you've never done these types of projects or never done estimates, you got to know that there are a lot of assets that you're not going to get in an office building, And I also feel that these types of properties demand a higher fee, for the expertise and the extra time it's going to take, to ferret out all these extra assets that you have in there. It's just more time and effort. You're going to have, but a bigger benefit to support a higher fee. And, I'm always looking at fees and trying to sell work. How do we sell it? How do we show our expertise? How do we close a deal? And then, of course, then you gotta come through, with a quality report. And these type, you could really spend, like a whole hour or so on every property talking about the differences. But really, that's kind of just my take on, you know, these more complex properties. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what you want. If you have a lot of complex properties, well, what do you want? You want something that's either big basis and easy to do, or a complex property. You can get higher fees.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I was just gonna, you made me think of, just it made me think of PPAs on these type of properties and how, when you see a very complex type of property, like, here's a great example is something that has and I forget all the levels, but the levels of clean room, right? You got like your 7 and your 6 and 5, and there's all these different levels of classification. If you buy that, that's a really difficult thing to buy and to really build out using like RS means and like well-known costs, because it's just one of those things where you're just that, you don't really know where they source the stuff from. You don't know what was custom. You don't know what it cost. I mean, you're really kind of guessing. I mean, you could maybe, get some estimates, right? Okay, hey, what did they pay the contractor, for this? And it's like when everything comes out 10x what it would have if you just did it with RS means. So a lot of times, I think many people are loath to have to stand behind that. But it does, there is I mean, there definitely is an issue when you're coming to something like fail safe and like military spec or like clean room spec stuff that you've got to it really behooves you to kind of get more this is hard to do, but to get more expertise, uh but like really kind of dig in and study these things, because there's a lot of money that gets spent in these areas when it absolutely cannot fail, that otherwise wouldn't be substantiated by, oh, that's an HVAC unit. It's like, well, it's not an HVAC unit. It's like something that you can run 24/7 for 10 years and it should never fail, should never break. It should never turn off unless the power's turned off, and then that gets into the spec on the electrical for such a thing. um,
Right.
so
Yeah,
any other tips in that direction?
there's like a medical, like the electrical contract will be higher
Yeah.
in a hospital or surgery center because there's code. It's medical grade wiring, piping, what type of
Disconnects,
conduit you
whatever,
use.
fusing.
Um, you got your HEPA filters and your special filtering systems in your HVAC,
Hmm.
it goes on and on, it does go on and on. Now, to be fair, to me, cost seg, what is cost seg? Cost seg is just breaking the building, into parts and accelerating what you're legally able to accelerate it, and then backing it up with facts and like RS means costs, to back it up. But it is still just an allocation. You're never going to be perfect. You're never doing a cost seg study. You're never going to be building it out just like you were a contractor. Don't have that kind of time. No, people don't want to pay for that. They want an allocation. They want a fair allocation, and they want it backed up by facts and details. But you do keep that in mind. Your electric is going to be higher. Your HVAC is going to be higher. Those kinds of things you mentioned, Richard, the plumbing. Even the flooring. We just recently did a study. Where we had the medical seamless flooring. Why? Because they don't want seams in there. They don't want to attract bacteria and germs and all this. It's more expensive. And then those contractors charge more to install it. So, I mean, many times it can be approaching 2x, and you wonder why you bill it out and you're so far from, the number, but properties are bought, they're not bought on cost new, they're bought on the income approach, the income approach, the market approach, so, you're never going to get to those kinds of numbers building it out, but you do have to, when you have these specialty type, you do have to, and that's why I say the expertise, you can charge for that, and the time, because you're gonna have extra time, hashing around, oh, I had this many outlets, well, all of a sudden that becomes more of a thinking, the engineer doing the work really has to evaluate, do I have enough money in this bucket?
Yeah, I mean, particularly when just to rehash the whole, like military spec or whatever, clean room spec, HVAC, it's like, beyond having, the actual blueprints that have the serial numbers and the, whatever, the manufacturer on it. It's like, if you don't have that, I mean, you're really going to have to reach back into some experience. Maybe somebody who's done these kinds of things before, because you're not gonna get the relative value. It's like, okay, you got RTUs in the building, right? Or your units, any kinds of, maybe, a whole other type of unit, like HVAC system for the regular building. But then this clean room exists inside of the building. It has its own HVAC. You got to price those things differently, or it's going to be like that. That won't make any sense, right? It's like, oh, you just charge them exactly what it would charge, what an HVAC contractor, any Joe Blow off the street would have come in and charged them. It's like, that's not what it costs. And you're not going to be adequately recovering, or allocating what they should have gotten. So,
Right.
uh, you
There's a
know,
lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it, when you get those kinds of projects. But you can
sure.
charge more.
Yeah. But I think, one of the things is like, and sometimes I'm loath uh, to ask the clients for more stuff. Actually, I should say always I'm loath to ask for more stuff,
Me too. I
just
hate it.
because I
I
know.
hate it.
Yeah. Dawn's agreeing that clients are terrible at getting you the stuff that you ask for, and then they're wondering why the study is. They always ask for. This is like a recurring theme. We could actually do a bloopers or something one day where it's like, what's the dumbest thing you've ever heard, or what's the most outrageous claim you've ever heard from a client? But like, I find like there's so many people who will ask for the study before they'll even respond to, hey, hey, we needed this. Here's some documents we need. Like, we really, really need them to continue. And then the next thing, the next email that you hear back from 3 weeks later is like, hey, where's this study? So I'm loath to ask for more, but I think, I think one of the points I want to make about this type of study in particular is that, we're talking about complex things that can't really be, I just don't think RS means is adequate to sort of, to substantiate. So, blueprints, I just think on these types of properties are really fundamental. And like I said, I don't like asking for stuff, but and look, they should be giving you the blueprints if they've got them. So, begging people for blueprints doesn't necessarily work, but on this type of property in particular, I mean, you can sort of overemphasize, like
Well,
really, really.
what I use, Richard, is I tell clients, hey, you may or may not have these documents, but I'm going to put together my wish list, for the ones like that. Okay. And guess what? If you supply these documents, I'm going to get you a better benefit. Then that spurs them along. If I don't have any information, I have to be conservative and do the best I can. But if I do have these drawings or I do have these costs or whatever you're asking for, I'll get you a better result. I'll get you more benefit. And that seems to work.
Yeah, the carrot
Like
pays.
An Alta survey, everybody gets them or can get them, on a purchase. And I'll just say, if I've got to do this by Google Earth, I'm going to have to be conservative. I'm not going to be able to see everything from the air or from the ground. And so a lot of these pictures are old. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but if I have an Alta, I can measure and quantify every friggin' thing on your
You
site.
guys don't
And
know
I'm
John. He actually does
or-
enjoy that. Measuring every freaking thing. I love it. Yeah. No, but this look, I love the fact that this is the better approach. I mean, it's carrot or stick, right? Like you could be like, well, if this gets audited, then we're gonna have to tell the IRS that there were no blueprints. For instance, like no one wants to tell their client that, and probably no one should, because you're not gonna be, that's not really, a good social way of getting your client to buy something. But telling them, hey, we can do a better job for you here if you can supply these. So, you
yeah,
should try and, look, have somebody go down and dig into the basement and just, if they're not there, they're not there. But,
right.
if you can get them, it's better. So I like that approach.
Get you more benefit.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I will say, from a client's perspective too, you should try to have your list all encompassing. So I think the worst thing I've seen is they ask for two and then later on, oh, I got five more. Oh, now that you've answered that, I got five more. No, from a
Yeah.
client's perspective, they're done. They're like,
Yeah.
no,
After the first
I'm
email, they're
ready.
pretty much, you're not getting any of this.
Yeah. Well, we just put a template together. What is our document request, wish list, whatever you want to call it, for new construction, for renovation, for TI, for purchase, and there are, all I do is just copy paste.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, look, you might even want to put it, but I would just say on these types of properties, even just emphasize even a little more on the blueprints and any documentation, because it's just,
Well,
especially on a
especially
purchase,
these complex
Yeah,
properties, you can say things like that, Um, you know, these are more complex properties and they really you typically will yield you much bigger benefit than say a typical office building or a warehouse. Uh, so the more documents I get, type things like drawings, floor plans, sketches, can really bring you a lot of extra benefit, you know. And when you talk about extra benefit, I mean, you're talking percentage points, I mean, the fee becomes like nothing. The fee is nothing. If I get an extra 2 points because I've got all the information I need, when you look at the basis and you look at that versus the fee,
yeah,
the fee should
obliterates.
really shouldn't come into it. Again, I argue it's like an accounting fee,
Well, there's another, something else you might want to ask. I mean, it would be great. And I look, honestly, I think I can count on two fingers how many times I've ever gotten a pay app on a purchase. But, on something like that, what we're talking about with this, like an installed something that's just like really, really spec, like a clean room or something like that. If you could just be like, look, I know you bought this building from someone else, but if you could reach out to them and even just get a pay app, I mean, for what they built this out for, because like they might have some idea what it got built out for, but to have the pay up and have it broken down, I mean, that is so great for a cost seg person to be like, look, I told you the HVAC was 10x.
Well,
You know,
I'll be
that's
honest with you. I personally never ask a client to go back to the previous owner. I think your chances of success there are pretty slim. And but Don's going 0.
Well, that's why I said, I mean, I've never even gotten, I mean, I think I've gotten one pay app on a purchase once that was on something that was like really complex. And I was like, it would just be amazing if you guys
Mhm.
could get the
Yeah.
pay app because I just don't see where, I mean, like I don't know what's up here. I mean, I even went up and looked above the ceiling tiles and I went and looked below the data floor and everything. But it's like to put that together from RS means cost, it was just more difficult. And it was,
Yeah.
and
There's
so,
no doubt.
yeah. Okay. Any questions on that? I don't think there are.
I'm not seeing anything in
Unless
the
I'm looking at the wrong
chat.
webinar chat. This looks pretty clean to me.
Yeah, I
So,
think everybody's waiting to talk about AI.
oh yeah, they want to talk about AI. So, all right, we're going to move on to AI, and the big surprise is that I'm not actually here today. This is my avatar, and I've just programmed. I've been actually working over the last 3 months. I've just been documenting everything I do. I've worn a 3D camera and everything, and it's just now it's got me down to every last and you guys leave in the comments, what you think. Is it good or is it like no, because we never liked Richard, so it's too spot on. Could you make Richard like more affable? You know, could he be? Anyway, all right. So AI in cost seg, real versus hype. Uh, yeah. All right. Well, I thought if anybody here, some people probably did go to the ASC. In fact, I do think I see people that went to the ASCSB conference. And there's this guy, Blake Oliver. He gave a talk again this year. He had given one last year. I think he does a great job, honestly, of breaking down, uh, what's possible right now and what's not, which was, I think, is kind of the great take. I think almost anything, you're going to do with AI, just in general, I think that it's a good take. It's like, okay, what is the state of things? What can we do now, and what might it be able to do in the future? Um, so I'll just break down, a little bit of the things like we've been looking at SegStream. Oh, sorry. Um, and so the things that we've seen that actually have some promise in the near term, in our research and development, practice, uh, are things like identifying things from photos, counting things, identifying, objects, types of flooring, types of wall coverings, things like that. I'll say all of this with the caveat that, it's not even trust, but verify. Probably don't trust, but verify. And so, the models that we have working on these things, they're picking out in limited cases, and being able to sort of give us even measurements on the amount of flooring in in this room or in this, like for instance, we've done a lot of work with single family homes just because they're kind of simple. And so it's like, hey, tell us how much, what are the different types of flooring in this house? How much how many square feet of this or that? Asking it a lot of questions, and we've been able to get, it's not perfect, but sometimes we're getting well above 80% accuracy on a range of different things. But I think just going back to what I said, as of right now, I think AI is pretty spotty on, you being able to trust. I mean, it's definitely like you just can't trust what it says. It's essentially like you're using it like a tool. It's almost like if you had hired somebody who has a little bit of like a vision problem and they're they're doing like your measurements, and you just can't like sometimes they get it pretty good because it was well lit or whatever, and whatever. So in other words, I think right now it seems to be able to do things like getting a fairly high degree of accuracy on a fairly simple project on a specific subset of things that people that do cost seg, might care about. Uh, Counting things, identifying different types of flooring. Though it may, and then
This is
that,
all from pictures. This is all
what's
from
that?
pictures in your pocket. This
Yeah,
is all from
from
or from
digesting
drawing.
photos. Yes, that's right. So like just putting the photos in and then just letting it. So, but with another caveat there that like, okay, yeah, the flooring. It's like, well, does it say that it's wood flooring or does it pick out that it's resilient laminate? It doesn't really know. Sometimes it will pick out that it's resilient laminate. I mean, that's the amazing thing is like it's kind of surprising that it can actually do that sometimes. I think it just depends on how close of a photo you got of that piece of flooring, right? So. Yeah, I mean, so this is my, personal experience with it, with what SegStream has been looking into as far as that specific thing going in, with AI. Um, what else are we looking into? I mean, oh, this is great. I think, information ingestion, and this is probably something that many of you have seen already, but I think that, when you've got, if you can create maybe daisy chain a process around, hey, here are the documents that I'm going to have for a new construction, and you know, train AIs around picking out the right pieces. I think for right now, I'm finding a high degree of accuracy with that kind of things, like over 90%, where it can actually, split things into a spreadsheet, and in our case, then enter them into, our interface, directly because we actually have spreadsheet ingestion already. So we were just actually just passing in a spreadsheet, of values. So that kind of stuff I think is great if you can, ask the AI to sort of fill out structured data, which in this case just meaning like a form. Like, okay, here are the values that I want to get out, and here's the information I've got. I'm finding that that's working quite well. That's something that's coming. Obviously, we're going to have features around this soon, um, and we're also going to have features around just like searching, how to do this better. So you guys could actually do this in your own processes. If you don't use SegStream, like you can kind of say, all right, what are my processes? And where can AI, where can I trust but verify what AI is doing? I think the main theme that I would probably reinforce is whatever you're doing, make it easy for you to check what the AI comes up with, because I think that's where things are really spotty. Is like if somebody's going to go, yeah, I'm just gonna just put everything into the AI and just let it like feed me a study. First of all, I think that's completely unrealistic at this point. I mean, it's not even close. But if you can go, hey, I've got this set thing that I want to get out, or that I know what I want to get out. Like if you know what you want to get out of a process, in this case, like let's say form data, then look, you can look at the form afterwards and you can see how well it did really easily. Oh, it's, I put 1 million square feet of something. Well, that's terrible. Like that's not, unless it was, obviously, 3 million square foot place. But I think just the main thing that I would iterate at this point or reiterate at this point is just that, if I think it's good for tasks that you can check it on easily. Um, that's kind of my take on sort of it in general. I don't know if you guys want to touch on that, Don or John.
Are you building this out like you have to do custom builds in order to integrate with your forms and different things? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, we're a software company, so I mean,
you're a software company, so I'm just curious about
yeah,
that. So I think like for like, somebody like me, just going out to ChatGPT on the bar, you can upload files and stuff like that. But I mean, I think it will come. I'm wondering what did they say at the ASCSP conference that it could be used for? I mean, I think it being able to do some like takeoffs and give you data output from that is a good one.
yeah. Essentially, what Blake put in his presentation was that he didn't think it was ready for prime time. But he had found sort of similar things, like where it works sometimes and it wouldn't work at other times, and it doesn't know the difference, but sometimes it does, and then so it's just not very reliable. So that I mean, kind of what I came away from, my personal experience and and just hearing other people talk like Blake is that the more that you can break a process down that you know what the like you can easily verify what the output is, then it can be helpful because if you spent if it was something that take you a couple of hours to do and now it only takes you 10 minutes to verify whether it was right. Now the thing is it takes you 10 minutes to verify. If there are problems, then you're going to have to go back and fix those problems, and that will require manual intervention. So it just depends, right? So it depends on how heavy the process is already, and then how closely you can verify the results directly after, is just what I'm finding. And look, I'm not saying that it's easy for everybody. I think it's becoming a lot easier. There's a lot of things out there that most people probably aren't dabbling with because they've got their job to do, right? So there's AI. They call it vibe coding now, right? So there's like Lovable and Cursor, and you can go and be like, oh, I'll just build something that uses these foundational AI models to sort of build a process. That sounds harder than it is, or maybe it sounds easier than it is actually, because then you kind of. And I think the biggest issue you have with the people in this room are how much time do I actually have to mess around with this stuff if I'm not sure it's going to work. So I think that's the biggest issue. I mean, we're a software company. I mean, that this is vital to what we're going to do, going into the future. And in Q1, everybody will be anyone that uses us will see, the ways that we believe that you should be using AI. But we are still going to have you verify it. We're gonna make it as good as we can, and we're gonna iterate on it. But we're gonna say, hey, this is stuff that you should be verifying. You are the professional. You are responsible for what this person is eventually submitting under audit if they come under audit. So you should definitely understand what it is that's going into these things if you're using any of these kind of automations.
I think from just a really, simplistic layman's kind of use of AI, I've enjoyed it. I'm paying for the, ChatGPT, the
Mhm.
paid prescription or subscription, and I like it. And one of the areas it sounds so simple, but it saves so much time that I've used it in this setting is I have clients, and I'm sure you guys do too, that just want to send me data in an email. Here's the renovations. I spent 5,000 for an HVAC. I did this, and then they've listed this all, and they didn't total it. And that is great. I can just even PDF that and then throw that PDF into Chat GPT and say, stick this into an Excel file for me and Summit. And then boom, I have it and I'm done. Because
That's great.
data conversion is frustrating. And I wouldn't say nobody, but so many clients aren't thinking about the fact that what am I going to do with all these numbers you just sent me in an email?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I spent 2,000
So,
on this and 10,000 on this and 15,000 on the landscaping. You're like,
so that's been
have
that's
you
been
never
great.
heard of Microsoft Excel?
Yeah, exactly. Just yes, please. So, but it's great at that. And my son showed me this, for school. You can put a picture in there. You can put a picture in there of with words on it. So I can just even take a picture of that email and stick it
Yeah,
in there, and it will see all of that, and it can convert it and put it. If I say I want it in Word, it can do that. Or if I say, and it's accurate for that kind of stuff.
but once again, you're not going to be like, oh, well, whatever it did in this spreadsheet, that's the Bible without even like doing any kind of a, like cursory check
No,
on it. Of course. Yeah,
no.
you're
I
going
mean,
to look
he's
at it.
like,
You're going to be like, does this add up? Like, is this what he actually said? And you can. That's the cool thing is like, I think that's what I mean by like, is it easily verifiable? In that case, it is. It's like you could even just look at the picture of the email and be like, oh yeah, yeah, 2,000,
yeah,
5,000.
you could
These
review
are
it in
these are
like
the
30
numbers that they
seconds.
quoted. Yeah.
Yeah. But it
Um,
saves me 10 minutes, every time, maybe a little more. All of that stuff is awesome. And it's a great,
And if it
springboard for kind of
Well, if it's
starting.
something that, by the way, yeah, let me get back to that, but in a second.
Yeah,
But
that's
if
fine.
it's something you're doing repeatable, I think that was another point I thought that Blake made really well. If you know that it's going to be a repeatable process, then you shouldn't have a problem spending an hour or two making sure that it works in the best way possible. And then you're doing it all the time, except for now you're not doing it all the time. You're actually having this automation in. So that's great. What were you saying? Yeah, sorry, good sounding board. Awesome. I mean, I think
It's a good sounding board.
that's
Like
been
it's a good, like for,
phenomenal.
yeah, for tax research, it's wrong a
It
lot.
is. Gets
It's a great starting place for, put in some words, what reg would you send me to? And then I go, off of that and then into the regs. But just to kind of in tax, you have to have the right buzzword just to even
yeah.
start your so sometimes when you're stuck on what that buzzword is, it can kind of help, connect those dots and all that
But
kind
it's
of
also
stuff.
great if you tell it to cite sources, for instance, because then, like, so for instance, like you said, it's wrong a lot. It's like, well, make sure that it's sending you to the source and that you can actually verify what it's saying. That's really great. The other thing was, so if not everybody will know about this, but hopefully most people here will know, about custom GPTs. So like if you're paying ChatGPT, you can create what's called a custom GPT, and all that means is that look, if you're in ChatGPT, historically it was like, let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to ask you this. And you kind of build in that conversation the knowledge that it has about what you're talking about. With a custom GPT, all you're doing is you're putting all that like knowledge that you know ahead of time into the custom GPT so that you don't have to write that every time, right? You're not having to go, hey, also remember that I don't want any I don't want you to use any blogs as a source. I only want you to look at the IRS Audit Techniques Guide when you're answering this question. Things like that. You can preload the documents into the custom GPT, and you can preload these instructions in. So that way, when you're chatting with it, you do not have to rehash those things every time. So that has been one of the bigger sort of enhancements that I found with this kind of sounding board stuff is to preload it with the information that is germane to the situation. And the cool thing is these custom GPTs, you can make as many as you want. So this one is for, like let's just say, for instance, I'm going to give you a picture of an email and I need you to create an Excel spreadsheet out of it that sums everything. Like, or if it's even more specific, you could give it more specific instructions. And so then that GPT, you don't have to tell it anything. You just upload the email image and it'll automatically spit out what you want every single time instead of you
Will it
having
fill
to give
out
it
a
that.
form? If it like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
say I have a Google form, I say, Take this information from an email and fill out my Google form." Will it do that?
Yeah, if you give it the URL probably, yeah. Well, I think it has to have edit rights is the only other thing. So there's a little wrinkle there. Like if it has to have edit rights, then it could be problematic. But
Yeah.
you could
You
probably
might
figure
have
out
to
how to
on a
make it do
different
that.
call
Yeah.
show us how to do this because I did not know that and I would love to figure out how I can use that because I like this kind of stuff. I
Okay.
want to know what computers can do for me.
Well, that's what I mean. That's kind of the point, right, with this stuff. So the idea. Oh, did we go past time? We flew right past it. It's 5 minutes
Wow.
past.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Sorry.
doesn't look like anybody has uh, any questions. So I think with that, I do have to go. But thank you everyone for being on. Thank you again, obviously, to my wonderful co-hosts, Don Polin and John Denovich, out in San Francisco as usual. Thanks to everybody here, and have a great day. Okay.